What's up, everybody? My name is Mike Hittinger. This is my first YouTube video. I have been thinking about doing this for a little while, and I decided since it's a rainy day outside, what better time than now to make my very first one. I am Canadian. My interest is personal finance. The number one goal of making this video and others like it will be to connect with like-minded individuals. I have an interest in Canadian finance. I have an interest in American finance. But as a YouTube connoisseur myself, I find that most of the content that I come across is geared towards Americans. I've heard a lot about Rothschild, IRAs, and 401ks. And for those of us in Canada, it doesn't quite translate. Recently, there has become a lot better Canadian content. I will admit that. But for those of you that are interested in sharing their experiences or learning about tax-free savings accounts and RRSPs, you're going to be in the right place. Okay, so I am 32 years old. I am born and raised in and around Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. I currently live in Edmonton. I bought my very first home here in Edmonton by house hacking back in 2012. For those of you who don't know, house hacking is when you essentially buy a property and you rent part of it out to help cover some, or if you're lucky, maybe even all of your mortgage. So what I did was I built a house with a self-contained basement suite, and I was able to rent it out and cover about half of my mortgage. So a self-contained basement suite is essentially a basement suite that operates completely independently of the upstairs. So my suite, it has its own separate furnace, its own hot water heater, its own entrance, its own kitchen. So there's no need for us to cross paths with each other unless we want to. So that being said, that was my first one. I had that for a few years now. I still have it now. I'm filming upstairs in it, actually. The second place that I ever bought was in the Okanagan, which it's my favorite place in Canada to visit. It's my favorite place in Canada to own. I want to be there full time someday. But for now, I had a condo there. And I bought that condo on a lake called Woods Lake. And what I did with it was I fixed it up a little bit, and 2 years later I was able to sell it for about a $80,000 profit. So obviously I was pretty happy with that, and I was able to take the $80,000 profit subject to capital gains and some of the equity that I had out of it, and I was able to reinvest it here in the Edmonton area, and that's when things really started to grow. There was a snowball effect. So from 2017, I was able to buy another house with a basement suite. I was able to buy a third house with a basement suite. I was able to buy a fourplex, and then I was able to buy some vacant lots to develop as well. So the thing is with buying real estate, everything after my first house, which is my principal residence, I spent a lot more time doing research and making sure that I could check off essentially three criteria. I wanted to make sure that first and foremost that each property that I bought would positive cash flow. So that means that the rental revenue that the property generates is adequate to cover the expenses. And we can get more into that later, but essentially you want to break even or obviously turn a profit every single month, as long as you're able to keep tenants in it. So that's something that I've strived for. As far as the rental property goes, there's essentially three different ways that you can make money off of the rental properties. You could have your positive cash flow. You can have your appreciation over time, which is basically just the value of your property increasing the longer that you own it. And then lastly, you're going to have a higher equity share in the property because every time you make a mortgage payment, your principal is getting paid down. So over time, your principal balance is going to approach zero. So between those three ways, it can make real estate a great way to invest. So aside from the rental properties that I have, I also have a tax-free savings account linked to a direct investing account. And this is something that I've used for the last 10 years or so. I've actually changed my strategy on how I use it a number of different times. Originally, what I would do is I would put money in my tax-free savings account, and then when I wanted to buy something, I would pull the money out and I would use that money to purchase whatever I wanted, whether it be a down payment on a property or something else. But recently, my strategy has changed. And, after watching a lot of Warren Buffett videos, I understand the power of compounding interest. So now that my tax-free savings account is at its $69,500 total contribution limit, I want to keep that money in there and not pull it out so that the interest compounds over time. But that's something we can elaborate on in future videos. There's a ton of information on that available. To understand compound interest, it doesn't make a difference whether you're in Canada, the United States, or somewhere else in the world. So to move on from that, I also have some RRSPs and I have some mutual funds as well. So obviously the benefit of regularly contributing to RRSPs is that you get a tax break in the current year, but the downside of that is when you retire someday and you do collect the income that you have in it, you are going to pay tax in it later. So recently, under some advice from my accountant, I haven't been buying too much RRSPs. I think I contribute something like $50 a week. So you could imagine that's only like $2,600 a year or something like that. So what my accountant has recommended is, because I have some real estate properties that I'm going to be selling, he thinks that I should hold off on buying the RRSPs until I sell something, and what I could essentially do is offset the capital gain. And if you don't really understand what I'm talking about right now, don't be discouraged, because I honestly didn't understand a lot of this stuff 10 years ago, and I'm still finding my way and I'm still learning as I go. So one thing that I do want to say is that I'm not a financial advisor and I'm not going to give advice, but I am going to share my experiences, and hopefully people can learn from my mistakes so they don't have to do the same mistakes themselves. All right, so regarding the stock market, it's something that I find fascinating, being able to buy into businesses and essentially own parts of those businesses. I've always been intrigued by it, and same thing, my strategy with it has changed over time. A few years back, I was very gung-ho, if you will, and I wanted to make money quick. And I had some successes and I had some failures, and I've definitely changed my strategy since then. Back in 2015, I had this strategy of trying to predict earnings before the earnings come out, and I ended up losing like $15,000 on LinkedIn. They missed their earnings and I got hammered, and so that wasn't very much fun. I still remember it was a Friday that the earnings report came out, and that afternoon I was actually driving 8 hours to Lake Louise for my friend's wedding, and it was a long, bitter car ride thinking about what a dumb mistake that I had made. So, that kind of discouraged me from playing the stock market for a few years. And, back in 2018, I started to get into it again. And this time I've taken a much more conservative approach to it. I've bought into companies that I'd like to hold for a long time. I'm not just buying them for, a swing trade or a day trade or anything like that. If you're interested in short selling, there's a ton of other videos out there on it. I personally don't do any short selling. For those of you who don't know, short selling is just when you you essentially borrow a stock and then you buy it to cover later at a lower price. So you're hoping that the price of the stock drops, and that's how you would essentially make a profit. So what I do have investments in now is index funds and Canadian banks. And I feel a lot more comfortable with it because they're positions that I'm completely comfortable having for years and years and years. And I don't feel like I have to look at them every day. And, it's just comfortable long term. So anyways, thanks for watching this to the very end. I was able to share a little bit about myself. If you have any questions or comments, or you want to add me on Instagram, my Instagram is my name. It's Mike Hittinger. I'll put the link below. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to comment below or add me on Instagram. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And moving forward, I'm going to make some individual videos about some of the properties that I bought, some of the challenges that I've had with those properties, some of the challenges that I've had with tenants, some of the challenges I've had being a landlord. Obviously, being that it's a personal finance channel, I'll talk about what it takes to buy rental properties, some of the hoops that you have to go through, some of the changing mortgage rules. So if you're interested in that, give the video a like, feel free to subscribe, and have a great day. Goodbye now.